Without further delay, we do want to kick off with the first keynote of the morning, and the topic is dynamic pricing, which also came up a little bit yesterday, but today we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into that because E.ON is in fact a company that initiated an extensive study on dynamic pricing in the city of Copenhagen. And they wanted to research changes in charging behavior among EV drivers. And we're going to get an overview of their initial results of this study. So we have two speakers. We have a speaker team this morning, so let's have a very warm round of applause for Arjan van der Eyck. He's the COO of E.ON Drive Infrastructure, and his colleague Anders Krag, who is the Managing Director of E.ON Drive Infrastructure Denmark. All right, gentlemen, we're ready for you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all awake. If not, my colleague Anders is going to wake you up in a moment. We are E.ON Drive Infrastructure, a European CPO with over 4,000 public charge points across 7 countries in Europe. We are growing rapidly across all our use cases, in your neighborhood, at your destination, or en route when you're traveling. We are very much looking forward to share with you some results on a pilot we have been doing in Denmark on dynamic pricing. For us, as a pure CPO, a very important topic. But first, Anders, do you think the people are awake?
I'm a little bit hesitant when Marianne asked, how was the party? People were like, So let's get this party started today. We start with 3 exercise questions, so be ready and be please engaging with us. The first question is, if you drive an EV today, please raise your right hand. We still have somebody who haven't found out that's real cool to drive an EV, but that might come. If you had an EV for more than 3 years, please stand up. Please keep standing. Do not sit down yet, because if you had an EV for more than 5 years, can I please ask you to jump on the spot? You know, it's exactly like what I'm doing. I'll be like, hey, guys, something cool is over here. I'll also be jumping if I were driving an EV from the start and say, come on over here, it's cool. Thank you very much for your participation, and back to you, Arjan.
So, the topic of dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing is nothing new. We didn't invent it as E.ON. I remember the first time I met it in person, it was 1998. I was in Las Vegas. I was standing in line in front of a reception of a hotel, and behind the receptionist was a sign with the old digital numbers of the price of the hotel room. And as the row behind me was getting longer, the price of the hotel room was going up. And this is an example of something we see in all industries at the moment. We are looking as companies to find an optimal match between supply and demand. We are trying to optimize the utilization. Whether we're in retail, in traveling, dynamic pricing is an option to find the optimum together with your customers in supply and demand. Also in our industry, in EV, it is not a new thing. We see it already with our competitors as well. An interesting one in Electrify America is you have different levels of pricing depending on the demand you get out of the charger, depending on what your car can do. So it's not a different charger, it's the same charger, but depending on what your car takes out of it, you pay a different price. So why is this dynamic pricing for us as a CPO important? We have a couple of reasons why we do this. First of all, for our customers. We want to offer our customers the best value for money, meaning if we have an option to buy electricity at a certain moment in time for a lower price, we want to share that lower price with our customers. We want to optimize the utilization of our assets and find for the customer the best value for money. Of course, we also want to ensure a better usage of green energy in the countries where we are active. Meaning if there's an oversupply of sustainable energy on the grid, we can use that momentum to offer it to our customers at a lower price and make sure it's used to the maximum. This is an advantage also for the grid operators, because it brings, at the moments where there is a peak load on the grid, more demand and stabilizes the grid. And of course, for us, it helps as well because it optimizes the utilization of our assets. And the same thing is for our EMPs, which we work together with, is they have a better match of supply and demand. And this is where we see a very big role for dynamic pricing going forward. But we need to learn how that works. We need to learn how our customers respond to it. We need to learn what the right levers are to use this going forward. That's why we did an extensive pilot, and we're still working on it at the moment in Denmark, and we want to share the results of that and the way we did it with you. Anders.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ian. So how to do dynamic pricing, and how did we entail this in the Danish market where we wanted to do the first trial? So we set up a scheme that we wanted to do a temporary discount of up to 50% in the hours where we see there's an abundance of green energy. And that's the innovative angle that Ian just mentioned, that we want to make sure that whenever energy is produced, we also make sure that we use it. So we also did it in a fixed time window, because in Denmark we have these smart meters, so we actually pay electricity per hour with these smart meters, meaning in the normal peak hour from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. there's a very high tariff on the transportation costs, and in that hour we will of course introduce a different scheme, not giving any rebates actually. We did decide to do a pilot with a certain amount of chargers to make sure that we actually had enough chargers to give us some quantitative data, and we decided to go with the capital of Copenhagen, where we actually have quite an extensive network, and we also actually had the EV drivers ready to do some testing, at least what I'll show you a bit later. So if we look a bit more deeply into the windows I just a little bit disclosed, we decided to try out these two discount windows, as you see here, one during the nighttime and one during the daytime. And how did we derive these two windows? As I said, in Denmark we have the smart meters, meaning in this time of hour, it's actually normal where the energy cost is the lowest in Denmark, because the peaks we will see when everybody gets up 6 a.m. until 10 a.m. where we arrive at work, and then it drops the utilization, and then it goes up again after 5 normally, and then we decided to try out the number 3. So what actually happened was we set a fixed price of 495 DKK, and then from that we have the algorithm working to measure or actually calculate the discounts given in the windows. And coming a bit back to why did we actually choose the market of Denmark to run this pilot? As I said, the dynamic pricing is actually a common model when we look into the energy market of Denmark. If you see at the screen up here, Denmark is very, very high rated when it comes to the share of households with smart meters. We have another country in the bottom, I don't need to mention the name, where it's not really a technology that's implemented yet. And then also, of course, we have a lot of the utility back home, like myself. We have these smart contracts with our energy providers, meaning if I decide to cook at home between 5 and 9, I know as a Dane it's going to cost me more than if I started cooking before 5 or after 9. So the awareness of these energy fluctuation pricing is quite big in Denmark, and after the energy crisis last year, I think it will be hard to find a Dane who doesn't have an energy app telling what is the price today and what is the price coming tomorrow. So one thing is to sit and say, like Ian said, we didn't invent dynamic pricing, but one thing is to get these ideas behind the desk. You also needed to get it on the other side into the customer, and then how did we actually go out and communicate to the customer about this? At the charge points on the AC chargers, we don't have that many screens, so we actually decided to go out with stickers. So on most of our most of the chargers that is in the pilot, but also nearby chargers, we put on stickers physically on the charger. And the reason why you see, that could be actually a bit funny to see 3 different kind of stickers is, first of all, we have a bit different hardware. We have 2 types mainly in Denmark. And secondly, we have a municipality of Copenhagen who is quite, I will not say rigid, but strict in their design codes, which means we had to go with the blue coloring for one of the sticks. But just leaving at the charge points, we deemed that was not really going to make anybody shift, putting something on a charger, because Us who drive EVs maybe know it, but also upcoming EV drivers should know about this pilot that we're going to try out. So we actually have a few colleagues, actually some of our student assistants, who went out in the public with the distribution of flyers. In the beginning, we wanted to make the flyer you see to the right look like a parking fine. We saw one of our competitors do it a few weeks before, and that was not that popular, so we decided to change the coloring so it didn't look exactly like a parking fine, but more getting the attention of the EV driver. We also distributed, normal flyers to everybody who passed by or had an EV or was interested in doing it, and we're still going to do it. So our EV buddies go out at our charge points, but also to the nearby charge points and customers to tell about this trial. So at that point, we reached our charge points, we reached some of our customers in the public, but we deemed that was not enough. So we also decided to go online with a paid social media and also go into these EV forums. I am not an expert how it works actually in Germany, but in Denmark I am quite impressed how these EV forums works, how quickly the word spreads when you can get a discount on charging. So it was actually quite big, and these EV forums, and it quickly picked up by some influencers also sharing this one without us really pushing too hard towards influencers. And lastly, we did a press release, and we also, of course, released it via our web pages in E.ON. So that was how we did the trial, how we derived it, how we should do, and how we actually pushed out the communication. The trial has now been running since the 8th of August, which means actually yesterday it was 3 weeks in. So the data you see here is only from last week. And a small disclaimer, 2 weeks of data could maybe not show the perfect trend. It could also be that the Danish holidays ended beginning of August, so we also see a lot of people coming back. Anyhow, we decided to go ahead and show a little sneak peek of what our initial data showed. It actually showed here, when we look at the baseline for the non-discounted charges in week 2, that there was a little drop of 9% of the utilization on these chargers. What is really fun to watch is the day discounted chargers had a peak and uptake of up to 65% in the utilization during the first 2 weeks. As I said, it can be difficult to say that's how it's going to look the next 3 months. So we actually decided to continue this trial until end of year to make sure we have some qualitative data coming in, and also for us to see how the customer behavior is when we launch a discount like this. And then we also really tried to engage heavily on the customers, and we decided to share one of the many comments we got, because it has been both negative, also some not that many negative, but at least some very neutral, a lot of follow-up questions. But the positive one was like this one: I want time of use tariff being billed by the hour, not a constant price across the session. Because in the Nordics and also in the cross of Europe, we are becoming more and more aware of the sustainability. We are becoming more and more aware of our resources and how we spend them. So that's why we really want to see how this trial picks out. And according to some of the testimonials we got from the customers, they actually like it. So we're not going to keep this to ourselves. So we want to share a little of our thoughts in regard to a timeline to share this with the community, because we think sharing is caring. So as I mentioned, the 8th of August, we went live in Copenhagen. Today, we actually decided to go out and make sure that EMPs can view the technical endpoint, how an EMP solution could look like. And then it is on our roadmap in 2024 to go out and do a priced offer available via Object. All the technical details, I'm not an expert in, unfortunately. I'm the managing director, but come around our booth later today or during the day. We have more knowledgeable technical people there who can tell you more about the interface and how we can actually integrate into this one. So, I've talked a lot, I've shown you a lot. Now it's time for you again to be active. Please scan the QR code, go to the municipality of Copenhagen or the capital area, check out different chargers. You can see some of them are discounted, some of them are not. And that's just a proof of concept. So I'm not just saying anything here on the stage, but it's actually live. So if you are in Copenhagen today, you can go directly out and use our discounted models. You'll come into our webpage where you'll find around 53 locations where we have the chargers as a part of this pilot. And it's very dynamic. So it's an algorithm running behind all the calculations. So if you find a charger that is discounted today on the 50% discount, maybe it would not be tomorrow. And to allude a little bit into that, while you're looking into it, is actually some criteria like utilization, the cost of goods sold, but also a little bit more like how do we actually see the customer needs going into charging. I hope you all had success getting your phone activated, scanned the QR code, and then Ian and I are looking very much forward to your questions. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Anders and Arjan. And we're going to do the questions just like yesterday, so we have the option to do it the old-fashioned way. You can raise your hand, and a Hubject team member will come around with a microphone, or if you're feeling a little bit shy and don't want to speak, you can send a question using our app, and that, of course, also goes for our guests, participants who are joining via the live stream. If you have a question, you can use the app to send it to us, and we'll read it to our speakers here up on the stage. All right, so let's see, maybe from our audience, there's some gentleman in the back.
Hello, Vincent from MN Truck and Bus. I was wondering for AC overnight charging if you also see the need to communicate price tables for until the departure time via ISO 15118, or are you exchanging the price information via backend, via app to the customer?
I can take that one. As of today, it's only on the webpage. We're going to do it as we didn't want to really stir the pot from the beginning. We wanted to see the trial, how it worked out. So we decided only to go via our webpage, this one, Lade and Spar, going forward. But on our roadmap, it will be a different kind of means where we're going to disclose the prices going forward.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else from our audience? We have a gentleman here and then a gentleman there. So, and another one there. So we have 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Yes, basically two questions. The first is which percentage of your EV drivers use direct payment versus a card or something else?
It's different in different countries. We see in the Nordics that it's quite well used, direct payment. It's around 25% at the moment, and tendency going up. In Germany, for instance, it's clearly lower at the moment. So it's double digit, just double digit. But also there, we see it growing at the moment. Yeah.
And the other question that I have is, do you know how popular this scheme is with people that drive a company car in which they don't need to pay for the electricity themselves? Versus, let's say, the retail private user that actually pays for the electricity.
Yeah, we of course do not always know what kind of a driver is behind it. For us, is that it's a user, and we cannot always see what is behind it. Of course, we know we have more price-sensitive customers and less price-sensitive customers. So my expectation, but it's an expectation, I have no data behind it, is that it's, of course, in the first line, more interesting for customers that are more price-sensitive and have to pay for it themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Then we had 2 and then 3. So.
Good morning, I'm Guilherme from Bosch. You mentioned that the discount varies according to the algorithm. Which factors influence this change of discount? Thank you.
Those changes are our historical data like utilization. So we know the utilization behind the chargers and how utilized it's going to be. And it has no secret that I, as a business manager, also need certain targets on my chargers. So it will be nice to also move around some of the utilization. So that's one of the criteria behind it. Another criteria is the cost of goods sold, meaning the energy price. That also means how much rebate we can actually give, because we also need, of course, to make a sound business in the end. And that's some of the criteria we decided to put into the algorithm from the start. But as we go further in the project, we could add more criteria to see how the customer reacts to that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then if you can just pass the microphone over. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Merlijn from Allego. As I understood, you used the AC charge point at residential areas to do the discounts. I can imagine that the charging graph basically is reversed when you're talking about office charge points. So people were actually go to their office and then plug in. Would you also consider to use these discounts at those places there as well?
Well, we are a pure public CPO as E.ON Drive Infrastructure, so we have no charge point at premises of public companies. So for us, it's only the public space where we are active. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Clear.
But I can maybe allude a little bit to the charges we decided in the capital area. We didn't decide just residential area, we also decided in the inner city of the capital of Copenhagen to take some of these charges in because they could be used for a person like me going shopping with my family in there. So it's not only residential area, we decided to try this one out.
We have a question on this side, on that here, and in the back. So 1, 2, 3. So there's one right there. Oh, I think that gentleman had his hand up first, but it's okay. It's all right. Then you'll wait for a moment. You'll be next.
You woke them up pretty well, Anders.
Right. Good morning. My name is Piotr from Hochtief. I understood from your presentation that you offer the discount only through direct payment. So I wanted to understand what sort of direct payments you offer in Copenhagen. Is it just QR code or credit card payment? And the second question based on that is, why did you not implement it in your own EMP solution, but just in direct payment? Thank you.
Yes, perfect question, and I'll try and answer that. First of all, we only offer right now the one-time payment via credit card via the webpage Lad om Spar, and you can also get it via our app. And second question, reason why we didn't want to include it already now in our EMP solution is we wanted to test, first of all, how do the customer react to this, and it also, secondly, is because we're going to do maybe a bit more stuff and play around with this trial. So the terms and conditions with the EMP customers needs to change constantly then. That's a bit different on a one-time payment, leaving us more space to actually try stuff out in the beginning of the trial. And as shown in the roadmap, we will make an EMP offer later on, but we want to make sure that, of course, our system works, first of all. Secondly, also that the customer actually want this offer, because otherwise it will be in vain, try to implement it into EMPs. But as the results shown so far, the customers actually like it. And at that point, we will look into implementing into EMP solutions also.
Okay, so now we'll get to the question on that side of the room.
Yeah, Markus Hackmann, P3. Thanks, Ian, Anders. Very, very interesting. I think perfect example, pilot in one market, then spread over to whole Europe, hopefully. You showed a very interesting slide about smart meter rollout. So if we look at Germany, shame as ever in that sector, what is your recommendation and your learnings from that? And can we maybe spread over? Also, we talked about vehicle to grid and vehicle to home yesterday to this area from the learnings. And I think this is very interesting for the audience as well to talk about this. What wishes, recommendations, learnings for Germany?
Well, let's first of all say I always try to focus on the things I can influence. And the German smart meter rollout is not one of them. So what I think is we used the smart meter example to show that our Danish customers are more used to dynamic pricing in the energy world already. And I think this is something you do not necessarily need a smart meter to be used to dynamic pricing. So it's not that we will not implement it in Germany because there are no smart meters. So we will also move to Germany if the pilot is successful in that perspective. Of course, if the technology takes another step, it helps us as well. But I try to stay away from things I cannot influence.
All right.
Okay, we had another question, I think, in the back over there, and another one over here. Okay, so 1 and then 2.
Good morning, I'm Shreyas from DCS. I just had one question regarding the dynamic pricing. So whenever there is a dispute in the charging session, how do you think you're going to solve it if a customer is saying that the price was X, Y, Z, and then you have another data?
I can go ahead with that one. It actually has happened not many times, but a few times already. And whatever you do, you make sure that when you test something out, it should never be in vain for the customer. So if there's a dispute, of course, we look into it, but during a trial, we mostly reimburse if there's any dispute, because it's us who decided to go for a trial, and we really like the customer to engage. Giving them a bad customer journey during a trial is not really, it's never great to give a customer a bad experience, right? But especially when we decided to do a trial, we should be the fair party and just reimburse the customer.
Thank you.
So the customer is always right.
Of course.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Okay, we had another question over here.
Good morning. I'm Cengiz from Bosch. Thank you, first of all. I have a question regarding the utilization and profitability. I mean, on the first time, you are pushing the utilization very steep, as we have seen. But do you think this could also be a long-term strategy in order to push the utilization and the profitability?
Well, let's say we wouldn't have piloted it if we did not have a feeling it would help us. Yeah? So yes, I think it's one of the methods we can use going forward to optimize the utilization. And it's a win-win-win, as I said in the beginning, for the customer, for the environment, for the grid operator, and for the EMP and the CPO as well. So I think everything that helps us utilizing the infrastructure at the moment that there is an abundance of sustainable energy available, I think should be the strategy of all of us, basically.
And if I can allude a little bit to that one on the sustainability angle, we also, I don't know if everybody knows, but it actually takes quite some resources producing a charger, installing a charger, and putting something out there. I don't think it's a question of that we can put up chargers, it's merely that we ensure that the location we install them, that they're also going to be used. At least in drive infrastructure, we do not want to put up abundance of chargers just because then we have a market position and then they're just left alone. Because then we can maybe question if it's a green transition. So we should also make sure that there's a utilization on the chargers we put up. Otherwise, it could have been in vain what we're doing right now.
We have a couple more minutes, so if anybody else has a question, yep, we have. Oh, you have a follow-up, and then we have 2, and then 3.
Just one follow-up. But the drop of 9%, how do you explain that? From the baseline usage.
To explain the 9%, I would say was because you see a change from the normal, not discounted charges into the discounted charges, meaning that the customers actually found out that moving maybe 100 meters to the next charger, they could save maybe up to 50% in the charges. So that's so far what the data tells us, that the customers is responding to price, which should be the case. But we also see, the shift much bigger than towards the non-discount or to the discounted charges, meaning that we get new customers in as well. So it's not just our own customers that we move, but it's also new customers coming in and making sure we get a higher utilization.
Okay, so we have the 2 final questions in the center here. The microphone is coming behind you. There it is.
Yes, hello, good morning. I'm Ewout from Shell. I have a question about the dynamic prices and the transparency. So in a charging session, it can take up over, let's say, a period that has 3 different prices. How do you communicate that to customers, and is that also AFIR compliant?
Yeah, I can try and answer that one. What we've done in the trial here is that we actually make sure that we keep the customers in the window by also applying a blocking fee, which the customers will be notified when they start the charge session. So that way we'll leave them in actually the windows of the discounted. So I think in the first 2 disputes we got was actually the case where the customer didn't realize that. So what we did recently was that we launched the second SoMe campaign telling that you have to be aware of the windows, but you also have to be aware that there is a blocking fee, so you need to move into the windows. So I think it's a great example that communication is not always easy, but also that the customers actually quite quickly respond to the changes in a trial like this.
And we have one final question right there.
Hi, my name is Timo from Mercedes Me Charge, and I just have one question. What would be your take on of dynamic pricing, of the impact of dynamic pricing on fixed price tariffs?
I think what we will see is we as a CPO will use the pricing strategies that will optimize our utilization. And whether it's going to be a dynamic pricing or a fixed price for certain charge types or in certain countries, I think it's very difficult to say right now. What we think is most important is, first of all, transparency for the customer. I think it's very rightfully just said, the customer needs to know what he gets when he charges. And we need to use, as a CPO, any means we can think of to communicate to that customer and be transparent. On the charger, on the app, I don't care where, the customer needs to know. And that's the first thing. And then we need to find the pricing model that optimizes the utilization. And whether it's a fixed price or a dynamic price, we will see. The future will tell. Yeah.
So there's obviously a lot of interest in dynamic pricing. We have to end it here, but I'm sure the two of them would be happy to answer any further questions that any of you may have. You can approach them. They look to be pretty friendly guys, so just grab them and you can ask your questions. Arjen and Anders, thank you so very much indeed. Thank you, and thanks to you for your questions.
Thank you very much, guys.